2016. So we're talking about harm reduction versus prevention and abstinence. So I will be representing the harm reduction party.
And I will be representing the prevention party, and I expect to win big.
So, to tell you a little bit about my stance here. So, so there's two parties, two approaches to substance use treatment. So one of them being harm reduction. And so what that is saying is that we've got different strategies that we can use to reduce the harmful effects of drug use. It's really hard sometimes to completely eliminate it. I don't think that's a very feasible expectation to have. And so with harm reduction, again, we're trying to reduce the actual harm of drug use, and therefore it might be easier for future treatment or to just, again, reduce some of these negative effects. And, we've been really, really big, especially in substance use treatment, since the 1980s. So some other, examples of this might be needle exchange programs. So for people who are using drugs, which they're injecting with needles, again, providing clean needles for these people to, again, reduce the effects of, the harmful effects of what would be sharing needles and things like that. So in this case, again, we're not telling people that you absolutely need to quit and totally be abstinent, but we are helping them take a step in a better direction, and it'll make it easier for them to seek treatment in the future and feel more supported in that. So again, abstinence isn't always a realistic goal, and there's a lot of treatment barriers for many people. So with harm reduction, again, we're trying to just kind of, pick a better option for people to reduce the overall effects of drug use that we're probably never going to completely eliminate.
So on the flip side of that, I will be representing the prevention and abstinence only side of this debate. Our belief is that any exposure to any addictive substance at all is harmful, and we need to eliminate any possible exposures. We need to target it and eliminate it. Target it and eliminate it. And a way that we do that is by instituting lots of policies, lots of regulations, lots of taxes, lots of other things that make it hard for these addictive substances to be in the public. And while harm reduction is a good approach, we believe that abstinence is the best approach, the biggest approach. And we have a lot of people, say Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 Steps and Narcotics Anonymous, who really take to this model of stopping substance use and stopping addiction. So it's something that works for a lot of people, and we have really strong faith in it. And we believe that we'll show the efficacy and the use of this particular mindset.
All right. So just a little bit of background on, the issue of cigarette smoking and smoking cessation. So we all in here know just how bad cigarette smoking is for you. Again, really huge issue, especially in the U.S. We think it's responsible for about 500,000 deaths each year. And 1/3 of cancer deaths in the United States can be attributed to cigarette smoking. So really huge issue for our country here. But fortunately, quitting smoking, you can reduce some of these risks, and you can reduce the mortality and the health effects. So it's never too late to quit, and quitting is one of the best things that you can do. And so, kind of our more traditional methods of quitting smoking and smoking cessation. So a lot of people will attempt to quit smoking doing what they call cold turkey. So that's just picking a day, stopping, and, kind of not using any help and never looking back. So it can work for some people, but for other people, that's really challenging. Again, cigarettes are very, very addictive. So we've got some medications, things like nicotine replacement therapy or other prescription medications that will help people quit smoking. And then we also have programs in line to assist with relapse prevention. So typically when we think about cigarette smoking, the goal is to remain completely cigarette-free for the rest of your life. So in that case, again, it's really hard for someone who's quit smoking to just go out and have the occasional cigarette here and there. That can actually be a really dangerous behavior and can lead to picking up a smoking habit again. So when we think about cigarette smoking, traditionally it is sort of like an abstinence-only program that we have. It's so we really, a lot of the treatments are kind of based off of that. But we've got these new drugs, so e-cigarettes, that have come into play, and so it's kind of, sort of changing the landscape about how we think about tobacco products in general, but also how we think about smoking cessation treatment. So that's kind of the theme of the debate today, which we will have moderated by Chad. So let's start off with the various questions. I don't know if you want to set any ground rules.
You're going by 2 minutes a question. It's going to be a hard rule, and you're going to hear a radar go off when it goes, and if you keep talking beyond that, then you're going to get points taken off.
There's points.
Yeah, there's points.
I look forward to earning the most points.
This is an actual flavor you can purchase, by the way. Tastes like America.
Is this the first question?
Yep.
Okay, so e-cigarettes are new, so we can't be sure of their safety. But some believe that they might not be as bad as smoking. So how should we address the safety of our country with policy, regulation, and guidelines? And I'm going to pass it off to Amanda first.
All right, so again, e-cigarettes are new, but we have had some preliminary research on them, at least short term, and we're finding that they're not as harmful as cigarettes, kind of in the immediate sense. So of all of the harm of cigarettes, e-cigarettes are about only 5% of that actual harm. So they're really significantly less bad for you, and so it's important to kind of keep that in mind. So right, we don't know the long-term effects, but we should definitely be endorsing people choosing these options over cigarettes because we do know that in this short term they are healthier for you. Policy and regulations should make it so that these products are accessible to people who want to quit smoking and want to cut back because they are a lot safer in the short term. We want to make sure that we kind of can develop some programs and some supported, scientifically supported tips about how to use these products to quit smoking and really encouraging that smoking cessation side of things. So, all right, that's gonna be the end of my answer there.
Can I respond to that?
You can.
Can I respond to that? So my opponent makes a lot of really good points, but she says there's 5% harm. Any percent harm is too much percent harm, right? Our goal is to try to eliminate addiction and to eliminate harm entirely. So the fact that there's any potential for harm in any generation means that these products are not safe and shouldn't be used by the public. Now, in terms of safety, there's not just the issue with smoking versus e-cigarettes. These devices are not regulated in any way right now in many countries across the world. There's new regulations here in the United States, but they're not necessarily enacted to control things like explosions. Think about your kids having these e-cigarettes, and the next thing you know, boom, it just explodes, much like I exploded into the political sphere, right? There's also the e-juices. We don't know what's in those e-juices. We know nicotine's in them. Nicotine is addictive. We don't know what else is in there. And what if the juices leak and get onto the skin of your kids, much like my opponent's email server leaked out into the public, right? So the point is there are lots of issues surrounding these devices. And until we know for sure and know for certain that they're completely safe, that they cause no harm, and that they're not going to do things like explode, hurt our children, cause issues with any sort of medical problems, then we need to do our best to regulate them and to not let them be as widely available as they are now. So that's my answer.
No response?
So, you talk about these things blowing up much like you believe you have in the political scene. So that's actually, it's pretty rare. Again, it's those oddball cases, those deplorable cases, if you will, where you again have these devices that are blowing up, and that's it's usually at the fault of the owner. So those are people who are kind of tinkering with their devices and sort of kind of creating their own, and that's why again we really need to better support the industry of it with policy and regulations so that we're able to create safe devices, safe juices, and have those available for people who genuinely want to take a step in the right direction for their health.
Okay.
We're gonna have to move on to the next question.
Or do we want to open up for comments to the general audience?
This is to be serious. Like, do anybody have any thoughts on this particular question? Wow, we covered everything. Good job, Hillary. Jonald Trump, actually.
Okay, so in order to reduce healthcare costs and mortality, quitting smoking should be encouraged. A lot of people are using e-cigarettes for smoking cessation. Should we be endorsing e-cigarettes as a method to do so? John?
Well, this is a great question. And again, it gets back to the issue of what do we know? We know that e-cigarettes have nicotine in them, and we know that nicotine is addictive. We know that from decades of people using cigarettes, which have nicotine in them. So, should we encourage this as a way to quit smoking? I say no. Nicotine is in both products. If people are switching from cigarettes to e-cigarettes, you're just continuing the addiction. And if you're continuing the addiction, you may be more likely to go back to smoking if you are just using e-cigarettes alone. Plus, we have all these really, 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 really cool products that people can use that have shown to work, like patches and gums and lozenges and all this fun stuff, right? Plus, there are medications that are approved by the FDA, including Chantix and Wellbutrin and others that have shown to work. Any studies, large studies, that have tested e-cigarettes as a way to quit smoking have been not so great, not so great. So they don't provide great results that prove to us that these are even effective, or even more as effective as nicotine replacements like gums and patches. So why would we want to push a product that we don't know that works? So as with the first question, we need more research and we need more understanding before we should even consider suggesting this.
That's a lovely response, Donald, but unlike you, Jonald, sorry, I've done my research in this, and I've actually looked at the science, which I understand. And, so the research is actually showing that in some trials, using e-cigarettes to help people quit smoking, the e-cigarette is just as effective as the patch. The e-cigarette may, even without nicotine, can be just as effective as a patch to help people quit smoking. So we do have some good research that shows that this is definitely possible. Again, there's some research that is coming out that's showing that people actually prefer e-cigarettes as a quit smoking treatment. Treatment's not going to work if people don't want to use it. If they don't want to use the patch or the gum, or they don't want to take Chantix, they're not going to quit smoking because they just don't have that. But with e-cigarettes, people want to use these. So if they want to use it as a treatment and we can develop ways to make it work better, then this is something we should definitely be doing. What's also really nice about it too, again, is thinking about the cost of this as a healthcare option. It may be less expensive than providing things like, expensive medications like Chantix. So again, there is a lot of research that's showing that these can really be helpful for people.
A lot is a big term. I don't know if I would agree with that term. There are only a couple of randomized controlled trials. Those are big words, big words. I have the best words. Randomized controlled trials that have shown any evidence at all that they might be effective. There needs to be more than just a couple. There needs to be a lot more research into this before we can even recommend it. Plus, given all the harms I talked about before, those aren't necessarily associated with patches and gums. Gums won't blow up on you. Gums won't leak on you, right? So why should we give the general public a product that might do them more harm than good? Not just for quitting smoking, but just in general.
So again, I agree that we do need some more research. There have only been a couple of trials, but this is because your buddy, the FDA there, isn't, they're over-regulating the research that we're able to do right now in the States. So certainly more research should be available, but I think that we need to open ourselves up to a lot of different viewpoints on what types of research we can do.
Any questions or comments for the candidates?
doing an awesome job, Hillary.
Real awesome, Donald.
Next question. So youth smoking rates are down, but e-cigarette use is high and rising. Is this what it is best for the children of our great nation? Amanda.
I think that this is really great news. So most people that start smoking and have a smoking habit for the rest of their lives, they start during adolescence. They start before they're 18, before they're legally able to use cigarettes. And that's kind of, again, when the habit develops. I think it's 80% of 18-year-olds who are smoking think they're going to quit within the next 5 years, and 90% are still smoking. So if youth are starting to use e-cigarettes, this could potentially eliminate that effect. So if we want to, again, think about our children in this aspect, they're using a product that is, again, 95% less bad than cigarettes. And they're using a product that isn't necessarily going to make them want to smoke cigarettes. E-cigarettes are very different in nature, and there's a lot of things about them that would deter youth from actually going and using cigarettes. Things like cost or flavors or even nicotine content. Most youth that are using e-cigarettes aren't actually using nicotine in them. So again, this is really potentially beneficial for the health and well-being of our children as they grow up.
Well, I couldn't disagree more. And let me just say before we get started that no one knows children better than I do. I am hip, I am cool, and I am in with the youth of this generation. But I was also hip and cool when I was a youngster. And when I was a youngster, smoking was a big, big issue among my generation. Lots of young people were smoking. Everyone was smoking. But over the course of my entire life, we've learned more about smoking, and we've learned how to stigmatize it. That's a big thing, stigmatization. I know all about that. That's right, Hillary. So we've done a lot of great work from a public health standpoint of making cigarettes look bad, right? So you can't smoke on your college campuses anymore. You can't smoke in your hospitals anymore. You can't smoke on planes anymore. But e-cigarettes threaten to undermine all that great work we've done. It might cause smoking, or vaping, or whatever you want to call it, to become normal again. And then next thing you know, we might get back to the same place we were when I was a kid. That's why I said I'm in with this generation, right? So we need to be careful about the message that we're sending our youth with e-cigarettes. Sure, this might help people quit smoking. Sure, it's a cool, hip product. There are risks involved, though, not just from a healthcare standpoint, but also from a public health standpoint, too. And if kids start to pick up e-cigarettes, who's to say they don't transition to smoking? Who's to say they don't transition to dual use? This is why regulating the products is what's best for business.
All right, well, much like your other policies, Donald, it's an interesting theory when you say it out loud, but again, I've come prepared with the facts, and youth cigarette smoking rate is down, and it dramatically dropped once e-cigarettes became more popular and more widely available. So if e-cigarettes led children to start smoking more and destigmatize smoking, we would see an increase, but we haven't. They're using e-cigarettes, but they're not using cigarettes as much as they used to. It's gone down dramatically.
But that's a correlation, right? We don't know that that's a causative effect. That's a big word. I have the best words. So we don't necessarily know that youth smoking is decreasing because e-cigarette use is increasing. And who's to say if long-term, as e-cigarettes continue to become hip and popular, that the smoking rate amongst youth doesn't increase over time. So these are very short-term, very temporary types of results, and it's important to look at a longer-term picture here. All right.
Questions or comments?
How do you feel about the use of some of the flavors that are aimed towards children, like gummy bear and other candy flavors? Is that a good thing to get children to use e-cigarettes instead of cigarettes, or is it a bad thing because it lures them to something they may never have thought about about using anyway.
Well, you obviously came prepared because our next debate question
Unlike
is
I'm
that-
with her.
So, because a future debate question does hit that exact topic.
Yes.
So, we're
We'll
gonna
get
keep you
there.
in suspense,
Yes.
and we're not gonna answer until we get to that question. I can't say. I can't say right now. I can't say.
Next
Hashtag I'm with her.
The government regulates and taxes out of e-cigarettes. Out of cigarettes, should we treat e-cigarettes the same? Let's go with John.
Well, that word is obviously locker room talk. That's why I left out of this presentation.
It was in one of my emails.
That's where I found it. So the question is, should we tax e-cigarettes? Well, I think you know my stance on money, and I say we need to make more money as a country. One of the problems in our country is that money continues to funnel overseas, and that's not immune to this e-cigarette industry. A lot of producers of e-cigarettes are coming from China and Asia and other countries. And until we have regulations in place to know what products we're producing here in the United States, that money's going to continue going over there. So placing taxes on e-cigarettes will cause us to get more money because we'll have more regulations and they'll be able to make more money for us as a country. But also, from a public health and from a general health standpoint, taxes may limit the number of people that use e-cigarettes. That's really worked well with tobacco cigarettes, right? Back in my day, cigarettes cost $0.25 a pack. Now they're up to $5 a pack, okay? And I think those taxation principles have really helped to limit the number of smokers in our country. Probably more so than the e-cigarettes, as you mentioned in our last question, right? So that's something else to consider, is that if this is a risky product, which we believe it is, we need to be able to control it much more effectively. And taxes really help that, because people in America should be spending their money on things like Donald Trump clothes or Donald Trump schools or other things, right? They don't need to be spending their money on e-cigarettes. But if they do, let's make more money in the process.
Interesting that you're okay with paying taxes now, Donald.
Mhm. I know the financial code the best.
So, again, if e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes and people are going to use something, we want to make sure that they're going to choose e-cigarettes for a lot of different reasons. One of them being cost. So if e-cigarettes are less expensive than cigarettes, that may be a way to help people, again, make that transition from smoking to using e-cigarettes. And you have to kind of consider the different components of the products. So you've got the actual device itself, which contains no tobacco, so we can't really regulate that as a tobacco product. And so, the quality of the device may shape the effectiveness of someone's quit attempt. So we want to make sure that those devices are accessible and that they're not overly taxed. The actual juices themselves, again, some of them don't contain nicotine. If someone wants to use a juice that doesn't have nicotine in it, that's not a tobacco product and they shouldn't be penalized by paying taxes for it. So again, keeping these as a lower cost of than cigarettes is going to make them more attractive in that way. Because again, keeping cigarettes more expensive keeps people away from them. And another thing to consider is that the cost of smoking cessation treatments is often a barrier for a lot of people. Patches aren't necessarily cheap. You have to buy a lot all at once, and it's a really tough investment for people to make. If you make e-cigarettes less expensive, especially less expensive than some of the other treatments that are available, like patches or prescription medications, that's going to, again, be another really attractive factor that makes people want to use these in order to engage in a quit attempt. So we should really be, again, carefully thinking about what the actual product is, right? We can't deem an electronic piece of equipment as a tobacco product if it doesn't have tobacco in it. We really need to think about what's going to be swaying people to make a decision when they're at that counter.
Well, I will say the FDA disagrees with you, because the FDA is regulating e-cigarettes as a tobacco product. And the Center for Tobacco Policy that's established by the FDA is overseeing the new regulations that are being put in place with these devices. So while you're technically correct that e-cigarettes don't contain tobacco, they do contain nicotine, which all tobacco products do. And that may be a reason why the FDA views them as a tobacco product.
Yes, it certainly is, but that's something again that we need to change and we need to review and make more policies about, because it's not correct and it might be actually stopping some people from again making a really positive change in their health.
Questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Considering the differences between different devices and differences between the juices product and the chemical inside, how safe is to use electronic cigarettes?
How safe is it?
Yeah.
Again, so
Besides nicotine, but the other chemical.
So I from my party's perspective, they're not safe because of the exact reasoning you just said. People can list any type of ingredients that they want on their packaging for their e-cigarettes, but we have science saying that's not necessarily the case. So for example, they might say they have a certain percentage of nicotine, but that's sometimes an underestimate, right? And that's scary to think about, because if we don't know what's in these things, we don't know what the consequences are. And there have been some scientific studies, I'll quote that because it's not the best science. I know the best science, this was not the best science. Suggesting that some e-cigarette liquids might have traces of formaldehyde in them, might cause popcorn lung, right? These are scary things. And from our party's perspective, we need to get ahead of them so that we can control them and not let the public suffer because of it.
So, I do agree that, again, that we need more information about what's in these things, but I don't think that because we don't know, we should eliminate them entirely. I think, again, this is something that we should have regulations and different policies on, about how these companies should be, displaying the information about the product and, testing the ingredients and things like that. I think that if the companies are aware of this, and I think that, I believe that they're very concerned about safety and they want to make sure that they're putting the right things in their products. So as long as it's transparent, I don't think we should eliminate them completely. I think we should do more research on this testing and making sure that we've got the best ingredients in there, because these could potentially be a really, life-saving product.
But they shouldn't be available until we know. That's what my party stance is. So we agree on the intermediate step about more stuff is necessary. We're all about the here and now, not the past, not conversations that happen on buses, not things that have happened before. We're about the here and now.
So America is a leader in many scientific fields. However, we seem to be falling behind in e-cigarette research. What should our future directions be, Amanda?
So, this is really true. I am proud to be an American, and especially for a lot of the science that we do. But again, unfortunately, we have way too many regulations here about what we can do with e-cigarette research. So what's going on now is e-cigarettes are considered a drug, but we have no kind of safety data on them. So we can't use them as an actual drug in a study until we get this safety data. However, people are out in the real world already using this. So the research that we need to do immediately right away, we're unable to do because we're held back by some of these regulations about what is a drug and what isn't a drug. So in order for us to develop better clinical trials, better randomized controlled trials, and really get some of this research going that we need, our FDA is going to have to let up a little bit. And the future research that we could do can be really great. Again, we can use these products to see if it helps people quit smoking. We can use these products to see what the differences between smoking and e-cigarette use is, and looking at different components. For example, does using an e-cigarette actually help with cigarette withdrawal? Because in that case, we can use that to develop future treatments and future policies. We'd be able to do more research about the effects of nicotine and some of the other contents in there. So we really, again, we are falling behind in our research, and a lot of the e-cigarette research is done overseas right now. And I would really like to see a lot more of that be here.
I couldn't agree more. Bringing back things to America is what we need to do, whether it be jobs or money or science especially. And
Not immigrants, though.
no. We need to protect ourselves but enable ourselves. That's what we need to do. But, and I agree with you too, that we need more research into e-cigarettes in general now. and that the rest of the world is really ahead of the game in this area. But I disagree with you on the topic. So your argument is that we should look into these products more for treatment purposes, conduct more randomized controlled trials. There are steps that we need to complete before getting there, as my party sees it. So I've talked a lot about safety of these products. And frankly, if you're going to be developing any new drug at all, which this is potentially classified as a drug, you need to establish that these drugs are safe for people to use. And there are ordered steps that these drug companies have to undergo before they can even consider running a randomized controlled trial to see if it's effective at doing what it's supposed to do. My view is that we should apply that same concept to e-cigarettes. We need to be able to understand how these devices work, how safe they are, and know much more about them before we give them to humans, before we give them to people to help them quit smoking. Because we want to be confident in our ability to say that they are the best product out there, the best product out there, okay? And before we can do that, we need to know how they work, and we need to know if they're safe for people.
I mean, those are fantastic points, but people are out there using them right now, and they're using them for their own personal treatment, and it's, you know, best for us to kind of to capitalize on that and to understand and appreciate that. You know, so I mean, if we kind of pull all of these things and start doing all this safety testing, I mean, research takes a while. I know that because I do research and understand science.
I'm prepared.
Donald.
I'm prepared.
I came prepared. But so again, while you're talking about doing all these steps, again, people are out using them. So I think we really need to figure out what's going on right here in the now before we take a step back.
General public?
I'll add something. So, working with the e-cigarette study, a lot of the times when I meet with patients and they'll kind of, you know, talk to me about their experience while, you know, before we get started with the survey and everything, they always tell me that they have had, most of them tell me that they've had a positive experience with e-cigarette usage. They find that it has helped them kind of like weave off of cigarettes, but they do mention that they wish that they had more information about it, especially coming from their physicians, because their physicians never tell them like, yes, you know, you should continue to smoke an e-cigarette. So they feel kind of hesitant to still continue doing it. And so that's why they kind of think about going off of it or staying on. They're not quite sure. So the reason why they stay on it is because they feel that it is working right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's why whenever we reach out to them to see if they would like to do the survey, they're more than happy to, because they also want the information that we're looking for. They want their physicians to get in on this and kind of be able to say, hey, this is good or this isn't good for you, so get off of it. So I think that there should be future research, and hopefully it moves for, you know, doing treatment studies, because a lot of them say that they find it effective. So they wish that there was more research saying that it really is.